Alright, we are back in the Red Eye garage. Thanks for stopping in. Big project underway. Wasn't really going to cover this because I assumed it was covered a lot, but it hasn't been. So, this truck has the 6.9 International diesel. I bought it knowing that it needed head gaskets, which after a quick Google search appeared that it's super common on these. You know, that the head gaskets go. The truck's 40 years old, but even before then they had problems. So that's what I'm doing right now, getting everything pulled apart. I didn't do a step-by-step because, like I said, I thought it would be covered like a 7.3 or a 5.9 head gasket. There'd be a million videos, but there's not. So I'm a little bit into the project, but I'm going to show you just some of, I'm not going to do step by step, but I'm going to talk about some of the things I encountered. So one of the big questions is, do you pull the whole motor or do you do it in the frame? I debated and decided to go with in the frame. Obviously, a lot of people said you can't, or some people said you can, it's just a pain. I think both are hard. Just have to pick your hard. So I went with pulling it in the frame. The motor doesn't need much else. Like the oil pan's in good shape, it's not leaking from the rear main seal. Those would be things I would definitely choose to remove the whole engine. I did use the engine hoist to pull the passenger side head because it's super cramped in there. You will have a little bit of clearance issue with the air conditioning box, but nothing too crazy. So what I did was I just used my chain, hooked it to the head, and picked it up and slid it out, picked it up, slid it out. Pretty easy like that. I'm sure putting it back in, I'll have to be a lot more careful that I don't damage the new gasket. I'll probably have a friend of mine come over to help. Something I encountered was a couple of the bolts, the hard to reach ones towards the back, felt like they were seized or stripped or something. They would turn a little bit and then get really hard. And at first I thought that I had problems with the threads, or they were just seized in the block, but they weren't. The head gasket failed in a spot that allowed compression leaks into the bolts, into the little channel where the bolts go. So we got all this carbon buildup, and if you look at a clean bolt, they have a step here and at the threads. They're thinner in the middle than they are in the ends, so all that carbon would get, you know, as the bolt's coming up through the head, it would jam right here, and I couldn't get the bolts out. So that made it really difficult to get the head off because I had a little bit of bolt sticking down below the head. So don't despair if your bolts don't come out. That it's probably not the bolt issue, it's the carbon in here, and don't just keep torquing it, you'll snap the bolts. So what I did was I'd go out and in and out and in and out and in. You can try to get oil down in there, it doesn't work. I did spray some starting fluid down in there, something really thin and solvent like, and that did help. I just kind of kept going back and forth. When it would get hard, I'd stop and go back in, and it eventually came out. If you can get an impact gun on them and just spin them, you know, fast back and forth, that's great, but I couldn't. I had to use a ratchet, and boy was that a pain in the butt. So having the engine out for that would definitely have been a help. So if your head bolts are stuck, it might not be a thread or a rusted seized bolt, it could just be this. This one was different. It leaked into an oil passage, and you can see the threads were just absolutely gunked up. So if you have this, make sure you chase all the threads in your block and clean out your head before you put it back. This is what they should look like. Little rust is normal. This one's dry, the threads are clean, and go from there. These use a tiny little 7/16 12 point. You'll break a socket or strip out these little points on this bolt, and then you'll be screwed. So don't do that. Another question that came up for me is, do you have to pull the injection pump? I didn't want to. I wanted to just pull the manifold, or even just raise the manifold up a little bit and sneak the heads out, but you just can't do it. At least I couldn't do it successfully. So don't pull this casing, this case here. Just pull these 3 bolts here, and there's 3 studs on the back, and it slides the pump right out. It can only go on one way. There's a key in it, and the threads will line up. So as long as you don't rotate the engine, you're fine. Even if you rotate the pump a little bit, it's going to have to line back up. And by leaving this case on, the gear that's inside here can't move. I also put scribe marks on the gear, the pump, and the 2 pieces of the pump and the housing that connect. So I should be able to get the timing close enough to at least get it to run. When you take the injection pump off, I took it off like this so that all the lines stay put. The nuts on the bottom of that pump would be almost impossible to get to with this in the truck, because you have the valley pan gasket in the way. So 3 studs, this comes off. You can see the pump is keyed. It has an O-ring. So we'll find out at the end of this video if it runs and how close the timing is when we put it all back together. But you do have to pull the manifold to do this job correctly. I didn't pull the exhaust manifold off until I had the head out of the engine compartment. 2 of the bolts were snapped off. I don't know if they vibrated and broke or if somebody broke them off, but the rest of them, I thought I'd have trouble getting them out, but they really all just were barely finger tight. This thing was leaking like crazy around a lot of these. So my gasket kit came with a new gasket. You can see how the back one, the valve cover was leaking really bad, and it was just puking right on that one. And this cylinder was dead, I believe, from the head gasket blowout. It didn't have enough compression to fire that cylinder, so it had a lot of fuel and oil gunked up in it. The dipstick was a huge source of frustration for me. The tube comes up in between the exhaust manifold on the passenger side. It's pressed into the block with an O-ring. It's just this chintzy little tube that just slides in the block, but my word was this annoying, because it goes in like this and it slides between the head and the manifold, so you can't remove the head with it in place. So I had to pull the starter to be able to get vice grips on that tube and wiggle it out. And there is a clamp with one of them exhaust manifold bolts. So just a lot of little things. None of them are that hard, but it's a pain. So that's just something to think about. Now I'm going to set up and remove the driver's side head. It's heavy. It probably weighs 120 pounds with the manifold. So don't hurt your back. This one's going to come off easy because all the head bolts come out. By what I'm saying is I was able to remove all the head bolts. So as I pull this out, I'm not going to have bolts hanging down. On this side, there's like 4 bolts in here that you can't remove because they hit this. So what you have to do is pull them up. Let me just show you. If they hang down, they'll get caught on the block and you won't be able to move the head out. So the bolts that you can't take out, pull them up as far as you can and put a rubber band or a zip tie around them like that so they stay there. Because if they drop down like that, they sink into the block enough that it's going to bind, and you're going to either damage the block, the bolt, or the head. So zip tie or rubber band them up out of the way. Now I'm going to get set up, get the engine hoist, and yank this driver's side head. I'm hoping it goes together a lot smoother than it came apart. I probably have 8 hours in it up to this point, just taking everything out. So we'll get set up, pull that head, and keep trucking along. Great success. So there was a ground strap on the back of the head, and I forgot one of the head bolts. It was loose, but it wasn't out. So if you saw me stop to grab that, that's what was going on. So pull this out. I'm gonna zap the exhaust manifold off of it and set it on the bench. All I'm doing to the head is cleaning it up. And I have all new injector return lines and these little clips. So we'll install those and make sure there's nothing wrong with it. Clean up the threads, clean out any of the water passages, but I'm not doing the valves or anything like that. Other than this head gasket leak, there was nothing wrong with this engine. So we'll just kind of look it over, clean it up, and get this baby back rolling down the road. Use this to hold it while I undo my chain. Nice and slow. This one head weighs about as much as the block in my engine or in my Jeep. These things are robust. So don't drop it on your toesies. So just be careful when you do this. Let the camera roll in case I do drop it. That'd be funny. I can see the thumbnail now. Dummy breaks his foot. Dropped that there cylinder. Oh yeah. That's a hunk of metal. Yeah. Still with me? Got him out on the bench. That should be the hard part. Beautiful. We'll check them over, make sure there's no cracks. Get this cleaned up. The coolant passages look pretty gross. Clean it all up good. And we'll also take care of the block. The most important part of a head gasket job, in my opinion, is the prep work, which is like a paint job. Gotta keep it clean. So let's take a look at this gasket. The other one, cylinder 1, the front cylinder, was just blown out. Front was like right here. It was completely blown. The fire ring was blown. This was blown. And it was exploded, like fire would come out up by the belts. And it was also compromised here, putting pressure into the coolant. Luckily there's no water in the oil and no oil in the water, so there were no contamination that way that would affect the bearings or the cooling system with oil and stuff like that. So several of the bolt holes were compromised, and that's what caused this. This side was much better. You can see all the fire rings are intact. Might have been a little bit squeaking through here. I guess people like to stud these engines, and that corrects a lot of the problem. I'm not putting a turbo on this, so I'm just gonna use bolts. But now we gotta clean this all out. You can see the rust dust that got in there. We'll check the cylinder walls. Shop vac that stuff out. That rust dust is extremely abrasive, so I'll get the shop vac out. We'll clean that well, get some oil in there, and just get it all nice and fresh for reinstallation. My nose is running. I am going to ask for assistance putting these heads back on because they are heavy. The gaskets are expensive and it's very precarious. The more I work on this thing, the more I like inline engines. You got one flat surface on top, right in the middle. Like, I would much rather do a 5.9 head gasket any day. Or TDI head gasket, even with the timing belt. It's easier than this. Anytime you take stuff apart like this, give yourself a little guide of how to put it back together. So that says front, driver, passenger. Keep your rockers, push rods, anything you remove. Since we're not replacing parts, I want it to all go back in exactly how it was, even end to end, left to right. The better you do putting it back together, you know, it was running okay other than the compression, like, that's how you want it to go back together. So mark stuff. I took tons of pictures, draw yourself diagrams, whatever. Some of the stuff doesn't matter, but the more groundwork you do, on disassembly, the better the repair will go, which I'm guessing most of you already know that, but just my tip. So now we clean. This is a mess, but like I said, it's very important to put it back together nice and clean. So I'm gonna get my shop vac out, some scrapers, some abrasive pads, and get these things ready to go back together. Well, I think I'm done for today. Freezing. It's cold out here. We got both heads pulled. Got everything cleaned up. I'll do a final cleaning with alcohol, like wipe everything down good before the gaskets go on. But got the manifold side. It all needs some wipe down, but no cracks. Everything looks good. So we'll wipe her all down good. Well, my GoPro battery died, so didn't get the last part of that. As you can see, the Chevy's back in here, GMC. So I'm gonna work on a part 2 video for you for an update on the end of the head gasket job. So stay tuned for part 2. Thanks for watching. Catch you later.